Hey everyone, Amanda texted me. Is everything all set to go?
I think so. I just started the webinar. It says it's recording,
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
and it looks like our participants are entering.
Wonderful.
Christina, do you see a question and answer box?
I do not. Let's see.
I don't either.
Okay. So we'll do all questions the other way. So thanks to everyone who's joining us. We're going to give it a couple minutes. We have about 24 participants right now, but we'll just wait a couple minutes and see who else joins us. Hi, everybody. This is Christina Anderson. Again, thanks for joining us. It is just now 6:30, but I'm going to give it just another 30 seconds or so as additional participants are joining. So thank you again, and we'll start in just a moment. Okay, I think we'll get started. The numbers haven't changed. So everybody, welcome to the presentation this evening. I'm going to share my screen in just a moment, but I thought I'd allow city staff and the consultants to introduce themselves before we start. And then we'll also talk about a couple housekeeping things. Again, my name is Christina Anderson, and I'm the city planner for Kalamazoo.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Anthony Ladd. I am the Public Works Division Manager in the Public Services Department, as well as the Assistant City Engineer for Public Works.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nolan Bergstrom. I'm a community planner for the city of Kalamazoo.
Good evening. I'm Al Hallbison. I'm with OHM Advisors. We're doing the bridge design work for the city. Had several projects over the years with the city of Kalamazoo. So.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, so bear with me. Hold on one second. Okay, now I'm really going to share my screen. Sorry. Okay. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We're going to give a short presentation with some information on the bridge, Inkster Bridge. And afterwards, we are happy to take questions. We thought that we'd be able to give you a couple of options for questions, including typing them into the Q&A box, as well as raising your hand and voicing them out loud. It appears that your only option will be to raise your hand and voice them out loud, but we're happy to give you our contact information at the end if you would like to ask a question, not out loud. We're going to keep track of the questions, and we'll put the summary online at the website that's listed here. This website is not yet live, but will be shortly. And next week, we'll include a copy of this recording, as well as a survey on some of the design alternatives that we're going to be talking about this evening. So watch for that next week. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Anthony Ladd to go over the details.
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, good evening, everybody. I want to thank you for taking your time to attend this informational meeting tonight. I'd like to start by saying how excited I am to be talking about this project and the work that we've been doing regarding the Inkster Street Bridge and the work we are doing more broadly in the city to address several of the concerns that have been raised through this process and engagement portion and informational meeting that we're talking about tonight, specifically focused around pedestrian travel and traffic calming and driver behavior. I want to start by talking a little bit about Inkster Avenue. I imagine most of you listening to this tonight can tell me more about this street than I can tell you about it. But really speaking about how it performs in the neighborhood and what this means to the community from a transportation aspect, both non-motorized and motorized, and how it connects the community on both sides of Bronson Boulevard, linking a route to Parkwood Upjohn, of course. This would be considered what we call a neighborhood spine, which has many streets that it connects to, running east-west, and also connecting to Verdict, Westnedge, and to Oakland. We'll get into this a little bit later, but the type of street that Inkster Avenue and the surrounding neighborhood streets, the way that they serve residents and public, make it a great candidate for some of the traffic calming implementations that we've been looking at and eager to discuss further more broadly with the neighborhood and through different areas of the neighborhood itself. And also want to touch on, with all the projects that we do, incorporating our master plan, Imagine Kalamazoo 2025, and how this project and all of our projects really speak to the values that we're espousing and what we value as a city, both internally as city civil servants, but also to the public at large, and what we value, what we've heard the community values as well, and trying to show how this new project, this new bridge, will really incorporate that. The existing Inkster Bridge was built in 1990. It is an entirely timber span bridge with timber substructure. It is 42 feet long with a 6-foot wide sidewalk that was originally designed. It still exists. However, as many of you know, it is in rough condition. In the spring of 2021, we made the decision, along with consultation with OHM, who handles a lot of our bridge inspections and our bridge program that we work with closely to monitor conditions of all of our bridges, make sure our routine inspections are done, our specialty inspections are done on time and reported to MDOT accurately. There were several concerns in spring of 2021 that prompted the city to close the bridge for vehicle traffic, mainly with loading concerns. And what we mean by that are trucks that do not necessarily adhere to the weight limits that are posted. The way that works is our consultant will come and do an inspection. There is an engineer that gives a safe load rating for those vehicles. And we were not seeing complete compliance even after having discussions with heavy vehicle companies that you might normally see, such as recycling and trash collection companies, other heavy construction pieces of machinery, such as dump trucks and heavy loaded equipment that was not adhering to the posted speed limit. Through this deterioration or through monitoring, which I think we have some decent ideas of what kind of caused this. The overloading doesn't help, but also it being a timber span bridge made it very vulnerable to freeze thaw conditions, especially in a very shady spot that you see here with all of the surrounding trees. That caused separation in some of the beams, and as well as started to make the rail slightly start to bend, which was also pretty visible as you were driving through Bronson Boulevard. Again, as you can see on the slide here, the wood was beginning to warp, and we closed it out of an abundance of caution, not at the time planning on an imminent reconstruction. Not having those funds available in our current capital plan, this was not something that we had anticipated having to do, but we did it nonetheless because safety is really paramount at our decision-making process for our capital projects. These are more pictures of the existing bridge. You can see as well the deck condition started to deteriorate as well, and once that layer becomes permeable and water starts to infiltrate, again with freeze thaw and other forces that are working on those timber members, that's what spurred the sag and the separation, the bending of the rail. So those were the physical challenges that this bridge posed. And once that was decided to be closed, we are now facing funding challenges. One of the things that we need to remember about this bridge in particular, because it is open to vehicular traffic and it is a designated Act 51 certified street. And what that means is it's eligible for your gas tax dollars that come from the state. If this was not to be, if the city decided to discontinue vehicular traffic on this bridge, we would not be eligible for that funding. And as it sits today, that's currently the funding mechanism for getting this bridge replaced and open back up for all members of the traveling public. Of course, an alternative is always local bonded funds through our capital program. I can say, though, that the price of replacing this bridge as only through city funding would equal about the same amount that we do for all of our local streets. Our paving, our preservation methods, repairs, everything combined would equal about that same amount. So really not an option from a city financed standpoint. MDOT allows regional bridge councils throughout the state, which we are a sitting member for our portion of the state, the southwest corner, to review applications that are submitted to these councils every year, and they are rated through each member by value to the city, the economic potential that it poses, the amount of work that needs to be done, its current condition, things like that. Every agency is allowed to submit for. We had applied for Inkster Street Bridge for a couple of years now, and we were finally able to get it selected in 2024 through that funding mechanism. This was actually selected this past fall in 2021, and those projects that were selected are to be constructed or given the funding obligation in 2024. Of course, one of the things that spurred, again, the design process so early on, typically for a project that's done in 2024, we would begin design in late 2022 or 2023. But the reason why we began the design as soon as this bridge was closed was to kind of give us a competitive advantage, or at least make us eligible for any future federal spending dollars that might be allotted through an infrastructure bill that's either done federally, or if the state decides to allocate separate bridge funds on top of its annual normal allocation. We've seen this in the last couple of years through what MDOT is calling bridge bundling programs. And that is where they are grouping similar bridges that need the same type of work, similar context together, and paying for these bridges themselves through state funds. And we wanted to make this bridge as eligible and competitive for that funding as possible. So we started that process right away, making sure that all of our environmental clearances were in place, and making sure that should that become a possibility, that we were really positioned the best way for that. So as we've mentioned through this process, we are really at the end of our structural design process for this bridge. There's a few things that were really driving our design decisions. One of the things was to make the bridge from concrete as opposed to timber. It's a pretty good example of what could happen with timber bridges when they're in these types of conditions, in shady areas that are not prone to an abundance of sunlight. Obviously, concrete is very strong against any de-icing treatments or any salt. It does not corrode the way steel would. It's something that is sturdy, that can last a very long time. And we'll get into some of the aesthetic features later on that we've added, and the features that we're looking for input to make sure that it represents the community, and it's something that we're proud of. These are some of the typical design standards that were included for this bridge. It's a concrete span of 65 feet. There is a 8-foot wide sidewalk on the bridge deck, where before there was a 6-foot sidewalk. And we'll see in a picture from now, there is a much wider sidewalk on both sides of Bronson Boulevard that really feeds into where we're wanting to go with some of our pedestrian focused attention to make that network work better for non-motorized users, as well as to buy into our traffic calming standards that we're now working to enforce in all of our projects, really. Also, with the addition of improved lighting and railing along Bronson Boulevard underneath the bridge, and also on top of the bridge deck as well. I believe the next slide we have this would be a view from the deck if you were headed east on Bronson Boulevard or on Inkster. You can see very similar to the layout that was there before, with the addition of bridge lights, new railing, new guardrail, and a much wider sidewalk for pedestrians. This is a view from the side. Again, a couple of things I want to point out is the very wide sidewalk. I think that it might be a little difficult in the rendering to picture that, but it is a significantly wider sidewalk than what exists now. With the addition of railing that will replace the existing chain link, and concrete decorative features on top of the bridge rail itself, and then also using different stamped features that we'll talk about here in a minute, and then with the lights underneath the bridge as well. And this is pointing out the railings. These are the 3 items that we are really looking for input from the community to weigh in on. We have several bridge wall designs that you'll see on the sides of the bridge there. We call those the bridge abutment, as well as railing along Bronson Boulevard and the bridge railing on the top, or the pattern along the bridge railing, I should say. So I'm just going to kind of speed through these. These will be some things that will be posted online and that we are looking to get opinion and weigh in on. These alternatives here are focused on the bridge abutments themselves. This is stacked stone. This is a block pattern, quarried stone, sandstone, and natural stone. Some of these stamped patterns resemble some of the retaining walls that can be seen along Bronson Boulevard too. So I'd like to point that out as that's being considered. The alternatives that we're looking for opinion on along Bronson Boulevard. This is one type of the horizontal railings. This is the second horizontal railing. And the third choice is a vertical picket that we have to choose from. And this is, again, probably subtle difference, probably something that you'll have to look at online to really zoom in and see, to weigh in on. But these are decorative bridge railings to choose from. Okay. Before we talk about next steps, I do want to speak more broadly again to how this Inkster Bridge, affects the neighborhood, because we did hear a lot of concern about fast cars. We did hear a lot about being able to travel safely off of the road, where a lot of this neighborhood does not have existing sidewalk. And that is something that we're working hard to address through a lot of our programs and a lot of our relationships that we're building with neighborhoods through the neighborhood planning process. And I think Christina might say a little more about that too. I don't want to overstep my area there, but these are programs that we're working on to address these issues that we believe this bridge can be a part of, to help get drivers where they need to go, to get non-motorist users, whether they're school children or adults, or just anybody recreationally using non-motorized facilities. This is something that we've been dedicated to for the last, at least, the last 18 months. And then, we've really ramped that up in the last year. And we're equally excited to talk about, our plans for those pilots and trying to understand specifically where the problems are in the neighborhood, and not, addressing those issues, so specifically to one bridge location that I don't, we're looking to kind of treat that issue holistically. And maybe I'll talk about a couple of the next steps and then turn it over to Christina. As we mentioned, this bridge has been selected by MDOT for 2024 funding for reconstruction of the bridge. If we can get this funded any sooner, we will do that. However, we know that that's going to happen at that point, and we'll continue to look for funding, but in a fiscally responsible way for the city. And that's why, as I mentioned, these funds are being sought after right now as we are nearing the end of design, so that we have that and we are competitive.
So Anthony, before I talk about the rest of these details, I just wanted to ask two questions that I'm guessing might be asked to us. And I don't know if it's you or Al who would be the best to answer these. But once construction starts, how long about would it take? And the second part of that is, often when we do street construction, we have the ability to keep one side of the road open, assuming that is not an option with bridge construction, at least with this project in particular. So I didn't know if you could speak to either of those two items.
Yeah, and typically, well, especially with a bridge like this that's already existing, there's going to be traffic impacts underneath that bridge. For us to demolish the existing bridge will require us to have traffic closures for a short period of time. Demolition's typically pretty quick. I think one of the things that we're hoping for through most of the construction, you'll have kind of broken up into two parts, where you are constructing the substructure, the base, the things that's going to hold your beams and deck, and then the beam work and deck work of your superstructure. Most of the time, in these conditions, when we are not putting any beams in the middle of the road, we're able to largely keep traffic open while we're working on that substructure. There will be closures when we bring in cranes to set beams, and then to do the deck work, and finally the finished painting and the amenities, if you will. We haven't really talked about a specific time frame. I would think, let's let Al answer that one. We hadn't talked about it, but I'll put him on the spot, and I know that this is a pretty simple design structurally.
Yeah, I guess I would say typically, I mean, I deal a lot with structures over water that, are a lot more complicated as far as access and such, but, something like this, and just to back up a little bit, we have done some preliminary design as far as foundations, and we're not looking at a pile supported structure. So that saves some time and some money with that. So I would put it probably in the 3 to 4 month category for total construction. I think is reasonable. So it is, it is a little more difficult if, trying to keep Bronson open. But, and there may be periods where we'd at least want some restriction to that. I mean, we would definitely want some probably a temporary barrier up to channel the traffic through, but a lot of it could be done from up above. So, but obviously when you do demolition and then when you set beams, they would want to be closing the Bronson at those points, but those would be short-term closures. So
Thanks. Okay, so last couple of items, and then I see a couple of people are raising their hands, and so I'll end the slide presentation just a moment, and hopefully allow you all to speak. So again, there will be from the page noted here, which is www.imaginekalamazoo.com/project/Inkster Bridge. From this site, we're going to be putting a copy of this presentation so you can share it with those that you know that were unable to join us tonight. And all the pictures that Anthony went through will be there. And so you can raise up those that are most favorable in your mind. Anthony started the presentation and mentioned it at the end. We know from past conversations with this neighborhood and actually several neighborhoods that traffic calming and the movement of pedestrians and bicyclists is of concern and important to our neighborhood residents. The best way to, at a neighborhood scale, so the network, the entire network of the neighborhood, to discuss that is through neighborhood planning. And so I know that there has been discussions about getting that started. We are here to help. I do not currently have a neighborhood planner. I will be hiring for that position hopefully in the next month or so, but I'm happy, as is Nolan, to help get you along the way. I know that some of you spoke with Dan Basin, who was our neighborhood planner before he left at the end of last year. So there's some path forward, some steps that are known in terms of the path forward for moving to neighborhood planning. But again, that is really a great place to have a neighborhood-wide conversation on traffic calming, pedestrian, and bike network. There are other neighborhoods in the cities who have had these conversations and through their neighborhood plans, and as a result, work has started in those locations. And I guess I would point out, if you're out and about, you can check out Greenleaf Boulevard in Parkview Hills, Winchell Avenue in the Winchell neighborhood. And for those of you that make it over to the east side of the Edison neighborhood, Emerald Drive has some traffic calming work on it as well. But the first two were definitely discussed in their neighborhood plan process. So we showed it in a couple of drawings, and we've talked about Bronson Boulevard. Bronson Boulevard is in our capital improvements plan, which is our 5-year plan that kind of lays out streets for whether it's resurfacing or other work, and we lay them out so we can properly budget. As Anthony talked about, budgeting can sometimes be a bit of a dance, and we get funds from multiple sources. And so we need to lay that out many years in advance. Bronson Boulevard, sorry, I'm having some trouble today, is scheduled for upcoming work. And so we'll be having conversations with the West Edge Hill neighborhood in the South West Edge Hill neighborhood, which is a neighborhood south of Kilgore, when we get to those two places to understand how we can calm traffic and think about Bronson Boulevard as the bike route that it's signed to be. And then, of course, when Bronson turns into Crosstown, it actually becomes a striped bike lane. So more on that, opportunities to discuss that in the future. So I'm going to stop sharing. I can at least do that. And I am going to pull up the participation list. And hopefully I will, let's see. Okay, I will call your name so you know that you're next and allow you to speak. Thank you. I'm sorry that this seems a little futzy, but here we go. So this is Steve Glista. I'm going to allow you to speak now. Can you, Steve?
I'm clicking the unmute button. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Good evening. Thanks everyone at the city for providing this information about the planning project. I have a couple of questions. I am wondering, if we're going to confine this just to the aesthetic components of the bridge, I'm wondering whether there are alternate design objectives that were considered in selecting this specific bridge design, or if this is kind of what the city decided to go with, and so here we are. No, you're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I'm going to let Anthony and Al talk to that question, Steve.
Sure. I think when we were talking about redesigning this bridge or replacing this bridge, a concrete span bridge was something that you could say was desired from a structural aspect, but also something that's extremely common throughout the state. Knowing that for the characteristics to for something that the city surrounding area and the neighborhood would be proud to have, that we could accomplish that through these aesthetic features. If we had a structure like this that that facilitated those items. I mean, there's a lot of amenities that were decided that were added onto this bridge to make it more than a simple concrete span bridge. So that's,
Well, I guess, am I still unmuted? I guess my question is more, the primary feature here is 2 lanes of vehicle traffic, right? And so everything else that's kind of being considered is peripheral to that initial design requirement that it support 2 lines of vehicle traffic. I'm wondering whether the city evaluated a plan at any point to have a bridge design that was fundamentally not just 2 lanes of vehicle traffic.
right.
Or did that just not enter the conversation?
So I would say instead of a bridge that just facilitated 2-way bridge traffic, I would say it's a bridge that facilitates all users because of the wide non-motorized path. And to answer your question directly, I think that was always the intention, was to have a structure that facilitated all users the same way it had before. And I think that from a connectivity standpoint, that was pretty inherent as something that was to be desired. And then also from the funding aspect as well, we knew that to get funding, since it is a street, that it would require to be able to facilitate that movement of traffic as well.
Okay, thank you for that. I think there's been a number of public comments submitted by email to Public Works and to city commissioners with comments on that design decision. And so I'm not going to repeat those here, but I would ask that they be entered in the record of this call so that those comments can be available to other folks who are looking at it. And from an aesthetic perspective, or I guess more from a functional perspective, I'm wondering if it's possible that in a design that incorporates 2 lanes of motorized vehicle traffic, is there a way to add a divider or a barrier between the vehicle traffic and the sidewalk or non-motorized pathway? So it's a protected lane instead of a sidewalk with cars right next to it at 45 miles an hour.
Sure. I guess just to say one more thing before I answer that, that the city did receive comments, certainly outlining those concerns and the desire for the bridge to, be used in a different way, certainly, and to not allow vehicular traffic. We also received comments that supported vehicular traffic as well, or restoring it back to the way it functioned for the community prior to it closing. And really, reading those comments, I don't want that to seem as something that was not noticed. I think really what we're doing as city staff is really reading into those comments and understanding the desire to have strong non-motorized facilities, the desire to have non-erratic driver behavior, drivers that follow a reasonable speed limit, because you have people that drive through that neighborhood. Something in all of our neighborhoods, we're trying to implement other methods, or methods that allow cars on the street, but trying to promote better driver behavior. And when you can't, like you mentioned, those physical barriers, getting pathways off, away from the roadway. There's really a wide range of things that we can do, and we know that as city staff, and knowing that problem doesn't just exist here on Inkster Bridge. It's really on any street where you have a mix of pedestrians, bicyclists, and cars. That's a challenge we face citywide, and we're committed to addressing that. And I just don't want that to be lost. That's not that is being heard. Certainly.
Okay, that's fair.
Oh, Anthony, did you want to speak
Yeah.
to the barrier part of the question?
Absolutely. It's not impossible to put that divided barrier in there. I think that regardless of what an actual speed might be, the design speed for that bridge is a lot slower. So if you were to look at it, it's not something that you would inherently need a railing at that location. It's not impossible. It's not something that can't be done. There's also an issue, once you're off that bridge, that sidewalk is still next to the road. That same condition carries off of the bridge. It's not only isolated to the bridge itself. And in fact, the bridge deck, the bridge sidewalk being wider than most of our sidewalk throughout the city, kind of creates a safer pedestrian movement. But no, to answer your question, that's not impossible.
Okay, Steve, I am going to go on to the next person.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the Wares, you are up next.
Hi, this is Sarah Ware. Thank you, Christina, and thank you, everybody. I want to say I appreciate everyone's work on this project. I was just a little disappointed to learn that the project has gotten this far down the line without, the nearest residents realizing that a pedestrian-only option was off the table. I understand that the funding available for car traffic is what is driving that decision. That makes sense. But in this day and age, when we're talking about climate change and other things, I'm just confused how a pedestrian-only bridge was not considered. That said, I do like the bike lanes on Bronson. I think that's very important, as many of my neighbors bike to work and should have that buffer on Bronson, where people, despite the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, drive much faster. But as a family who walks their children to school every day across the Inkster Bridge, I just really would love to see this bridge stay traffic free. It has been so much nicer since May of last year when the bridge was closed to car traffic. It has been such a relief in the neighborhood to have the lowered number of cars going down Inkster. I don't know much more to say other than that, but thank you for the time.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, Lauren Foley, I'm going to unmute you, allow you to speak.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
My name is Lauren Foley. Glista, who lives adjacent to the bridge. I think you guys caught my backyard there actually in a lot of your photos. I'm also somebody whose line of work involves applying for grant funding. So I completely empathize with how difficult it is to fund really worthy projects and to frequently have to tailor the project to the grant. That said, I'd like to echo the previous comment that while I appreciate this initial meeting on the aesthetic of the bridge, I wish that there had been this similar chance to comment on the potential function of the bridge post renovation before the grant proposal was submitted. It seems like from this that the grant determined function, and I wish there was a way to encourage the city, even if it meant slowing down this process, to look into other funding sources. I know that Governor Whitmer announced a few weeks ago that the state of Michigan was going to get $561 million for bridge repair as a result of the federal bipartisan infrastructure law. And I, be more than willing to be part of a neighborhood committee of people who also write grants for things to help research these opportunities and volunteer in any way that we can. I have watched, and since the bridge was closed, hundreds of dog walkers, people pushing strollers, school children, cyclists using the bridge, and really it becoming a more of a community artery and a gathering space than it ever was before, with the vehicle traffic that frankly the vehicles fly through the stop signs, and it makes it really unsafe for kids, my little kids on bikes and other ones in the neighborhood. So I just want to encourage the committee to potentially revisit the decision to close off public input on function. I know that you mentioned that you had heard people from both sides of the issue. I participated in a survey, I think, where 75% of the people were in favor of limiting bridge use to vehicles, 50% in favor of it just being pedestrian use. So again, if there is any way to volunteer for a committee of neighbors to work on grants to readdress the function of the bridge, not go forward just because this one grant was available. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. I think I'm going to volunteer you for the neighborhood planning effort. You can talk to Steve because I think he's interested as well.
That sounds great. Thanks.
Okay, Kim Fletcher. I'm going to try to unmute you. Hold on. I went too far. There you go, Kim.
Hi there, this is Matt Fletcher. I'm Kim's.
Sorry, Matt.
Sorry to do a bait and switch on you, but Kim is here with us. I wanted to thank everybody for all the work. I worked for over 25 years with the city, development, planning, etc. And even when we disagreed, you guys worked so hard. I love this plan. I think it's beautiful. The pictures of it are gorgeous. And the fact that, we can get it 100% funded is just, fantastic. I faced a lot of situations where they asked for $5,000 assessments from each property, over 5 and 10 years. And that wasn't nice. I have no interest. I mean, what seems to me to get left out here is that somehow people that ride bikes or walk aren't welcome. The bridge, as it was built many, many years ago, it's open to all. And there's no way we're going to be able to protect 100% of the people 100% of the time. For about 20 months, I worked on the Imagine It Kalamazoo in 2015 and 2016 for about 20 months. I never once heard somebody even mention the phrase traffic calming. That seems to be something that was, I don't want to know if it's invented, but it was just, I never heard anything about it. I also, in the hundreds of people I talked to, I mean, it was always about jobs and potholes and things like that. Very little about bike lanes, that's for sure. Anyway, back to the bridge. When I've talked to people about this, they have mentioned that it's, you know, it's nice that we can walk or bike or whatever. It seems to me there's this, there's also something else going on. It's about keeping undesirables out. You know, the guy with the junky pickup truck, you know, it's harder to reach our neighborhood or find our little neighborhood. You know, when that bridge is closed, you know, it's sort of neighbors only. You know what I mean? Ha ha ha. So to me, it's just sort of echoes like redlining. I think, you know, if we were building this bridge new, I think it would be a different situation, but that's not the case. Sorry, that's dinner's ready. Yeah, I just, I understand that there's some people that like to ride bikes, not much use on the bike paths, it seems to me, but whatever. But I just wanted to say that we love this plan. We're thrilled that there's no assessment. Yeah, love the plan that you guys showed, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt. I am going to, I don't know what I just did. I am going to, Justin, you're up next. Hopefully you are able to.
Okay, here I am. Thank you to everyone here in presenting and speaking before me. I wanted to just well, first I had a question. Is the traffic calming roundabout project on Inkster, where it turns to Alta Vista, whatever down the road, is that still happening? Yes.
Sure, Justin. So we talked about that shortly before the bridge closed. And we paused those conversations because the bridge was closed. And so we weren't, it wasn't something that we needed to handle at that time. I think that, and that's right before Anthony started, which is why I'm kind of stepping in to answer that question. I think that, you know, those type of activities on either side of the bridge would be something that, you know, that conversation sounds like we would want to restart as if, you know, speeds approaching the bridge are one of the topics of concern.
Okay, yeah, that's because to me, I know, I mean, part of it is, you know, part of it is sort of beyond control, but and I do appreciate having grant funds available. I do recognize that grant funding, even if it's not paid for out of a local budget, is not free. And I think it's, you know, it's tough for me to see, you know, state or federal grant funding paying for a bridge to make traffic faster on Inkster coming into a spot that we are going to have to spend other money, presumably grant money, but perhaps local money as well, to calm that traffic when it's, I think Lauren had spoken to earlier, if this were a you know, pedestrian bridge kind of project, would be a much lighter lift, you know, just in terms of total money. I'm not, you know, I'm not naive to think that there's going to be the same MDOT pot available for every type of bridge design. But I do agree with the concerns spoken earlier that being involved earlier in that process and having the neighbors be able to brainstorm and just say, how can we do this? Anthony talked about approaching things holistically. How can we do this holistically? Because what I see is, I see this bridge, and this bridge, will get built. And the other projects, when we talk about, safer streets for the rest of the neighborhood, may get built. And that is almost always the case, right? So where there's not sidewalks, we walk in the street. You have to walk in the street if there's no sidewalks. Traffic may be safe or it may not be safe, but what's most important is that traffic is moving, vehicle traffic is moving. And that's played out on this bridge, which is not super, as we've seen this last year, it's not super important to getting to where you need to go in a car, right? But it does definitely increase speeds when it's there, when traffic is moving through, people are moving fast. And so we're walking in the street, especially now when whether we've got snow, whether we've got, leaf piles, we're walking farther into the street, when cars start to move faster. You build this project for cars first, and then it's safe streets later. I see this bridge design, there's not even a sidewalk on the south side of the bridge, which granted, I know there's some, greenery and stuff in the way in the house just west of the bridge. But what it says is that there's never a possibility that if you did have sidewalks, if you did have a different, roadway design, that you could carry, traffic through, you could carry foot traffic through on that side to the, the bombed out sidewalk that's on the east side, the southeast side of the Inkster Bridge. So I guess it's, I'm just frustrated because I see these things happening, and I know if it's like, well, we're going to make streets safer and we're going to do this bridge, it's holistic. That is something to say, but really what gets done is, as Steve sort of expressed, is the priority is get car traffic moving, even if it's not important to cars, and even if it makes it less safe for other users of the road. And Matt was correct in saying the bridge is open to everyone. And there's a lot of streets that are open to everyone. Westnedge is open to everyone. You can go bike down Westnedge in a vehicle lane. It is open to you. It is not safe to you. And so when my kids are biking around or walking around on Inkster, it is relatively safe with that barrier in place right now. And it is very unsafe without that barrier in place. And so 2024, that situation might have changed, but what I'm hearing is, go talk to the neighborhood planner, go form a neighborhood committee, go talk about this. And, I talk about this a lot. We all talk about this a lot. And the only thing that has really actually made an improvement in making the street safer is having that bridge closure to vehicles. So I think I've said most of what I want to say here, so I'll stop.
Thanks, Justin. Okay. Bill, I'm going to allow you to talk next.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Well, great to follow up, Justin. I thought that was well said all the way through. And to reinforce that and to build upon that, I think one of the things to strongly consider is that this is a pedestrian neighborhood first. And that's what makes it a bit unsafe, is that most neighborhoods are very vehicular oriented. People are not used to having to worry about the pedestrians. They're safely away. And as Justin called out all the great reasons why we have people in the streets here, and we do a lot of people navigating the neighborhood. And they're not just pedestrians trying to get from point A to B, such as going to school and back. They're actually just out strolling and walking their dogs in strollers, pushing their kids, kids out running from neighbor to neighbor. So we just have a lot of people out and about. And we really need to consider that from the planning perspective. I'll switch a little bit to my expertise, which is about aesthetics. I'm not proud of this design, any of these design options. I think you really missed the mark. I don't think you considered the original bridge and the quality of the original bridge. I didn't hear about that at all in the presentation. I heard you talk about the problems with the existing bridge and not the beauty of the existing bridge. It's a wood structure that fits in really well with Bronson Boulevard with all the beautiful and amazing trees. I think it's really iconic in Kalamazoo. It's one of the first things I remember coming here and seeing and saying, wow, I'd love to live in that neighborhood someday. Never thinking I would 5 years later actually move into the neighborhood. And I really love that about it. Traffic calming. So for 27 years, Matt, I've been working on traffic calming designs and solutions with communities and others. So it is a real thing. And the best way for traffic calming is by design from the beginning of it. Big guardrails that make motorists feel safe, that they're going to be contained, that they can go any speed, are both aesthetically bad and will increase speed. Also, could we consider other ways of, we want it to be safe, of course, we know you'll make it safe, but instead of guardrails and a little bit of railing on there, why can't we look back to the original design of the bridge and think about the light railings and the lightness of that bridge, the short span of the bridge, the wood trestles underneath? There's something really fun about that experience of driving under that narrow road. Now that you've pushed the structural supports out farther into the embankments, it's much wider. I think it'll increase speeds on Bronson as well because of opening that up. So we'd really just appreciate reconsideration. I think many of my neighbors and friends here have said the same thing of going back and maybe considering other things. The existing bridge doesn't have big, heavy stone piers. It isn't big, heavy beams. It's very lightweight and small in scale and romantic in many ways. And so I'd be happy to help any way I can as well as you move forward. And we appreciate your efforts to date. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, Lynn, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to thank you for the opportunity for this meeting. And I have to say I had a little deja vu because I was remembering sitting in the City Commission chambers in 1988 when, as a member of the board of the Westnedge Hill Neighborhood Association, we talked about the replacement of the Inkster Bridge at that point. So I want to point out that the bridge that is being taken down is not the original bridge. There was a reason for why it was made of wood as opposed to concrete. I don't want to take up my time in going into detail about that. But aesthetics was just a small part of why wood was chosen. One of the reasons was also because of the cost. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think the city received any funding, or if they did, some funding for that through grants. So there was a reason for why that was there. Yes, it was considered to be more aesthetic, to go along with the trees, that type of thing, and the aesthetics of the nature around there. But we can see what's happened in 30 years. I can dig up an original if anybody would like to see what the original bridge looked like. But Mr. Ladd, if you'd like to know any more information about that, I can certainly provide that to you, because we're looking at about 1912, which is when Bronson Boulevard and the Inkster Bridge was first constructed. So, what I want to say, though, about the design, my training may not be in design. My training is in history and research. What a difference between the last 30 years when I think of the design, if they were doing concrete back now, as opposed to what is there. And I appreciate the option to be able to give input as you have given us the address that we need to look at and give our views on the choices that were presented. The questions that I have about this, of course, one thing I wanted to point out is, Westnedge Hill is a larger neighborhood, both on the east and west sides of Westnedge. But a couple questions I have, and I don't know who can address these. I'm thinking of the current condition of the bridge right now. You're talking about potentially a 2-year time period before it's replaced. I walk over the bridge, and I'm just wondering about the current condition, hopefully that it can, but could it withstand continued use by pedestrians? One of the things I've noticed this winter is there has been a major dump of road salt on at least both sides of the bridge. And I can understand trucks going by and they're laying it down for the part where you do have vehicular traffic, but I'm wondering of the condition of the salt on that right now. The other small thing is when you're looking at construction on Bronson Boulevard, do you also look at what else is going on at either Oakland Drive or Westnedge? Because I know that in both of those cases, Bronson Boulevard is, you know, as you know so well, a north-south corridor into the city and out of the city. And I didn't know if there were in long-term plans, any work that was going to be done on either Oakland or Westnedge. And like I said, that's something that I'm sure could be more considered when they have construction going on as far as that goes. Anyway, though, I do want to thank you, though, for having this meeting. I do appreciate it very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lynn. Anthony, do you want to answer her question while I?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in addition to the routine inspections that are still being done by OHM, city staff are monitoring and recording bridge deflection and making observations on a monthly basis. So we are continuing to monitor that even though it remains closed. And also in regards to the snow activities, this is the first winter that we've had that bridge closed for. And I know that was every time we make these changes to our streets, the city plow drivers react differently. And I've actually in the last little while here been working with them to change their patterns to make sure that we're not oversalting bridge. We're not putting salt piled up somewhere that is going to be a problem. It's really not something that's going to, since that salt is, we have those barricades and everything else should not be any bigger of a problem than your typical deterioration from salt. That is something we're aware of, and even if that bridge is closed, I know that there had been snow kind of piled up and banked up by the barricades. We're going to maintain that bridge to make sure that it still looks nice, to make sure that there's not salt and snow piling up. In the fall when the leaves come, to make sure that leaves aren't piled up on the bridge. We're going to maintain that until we can get it replaced. Now, if a time does come to where the bridge has continued to deteriorate, which we haven't seen to this point with our measurements and recordings that we're taking, then we would move to remove the bridge before it deteriorated any point past that it became a hazard for pedestrians walking on it or cars driving underneath it.
Thanks, Anthony. I have 4 people who have raised their hand, and those will be our last 4. We'll make sure we give you our contact information so there can be additional questions. So I have Bruce, Melinda, Michael, and Allison, and I'm going to start with Bruce. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
There we go. Sorry, I was also having to plug back into a power source. I want to thank Lynn for answering one of my questions as to when the bridge was actually built, current bridge. I had one design question. In looking at the renderings, I was scratching my head as to why the sidewalks on Bronson Boulevard seem to assume a small hump as they go under the bridge. So that was just a curiosity question. For the neighbors who have expressed a concern about the mix of vehicular and pedestrian traffic, I would have them perhaps consider the impact of switching, I'm sorry, not switching, but moving that vehicular traffic onto other streets in the neighborhood that may be slightly further away from their homes. As a 30-year resident of this neighborhood and a neighbor of Parkwood Upjohn School, I'm extremely aware of the importance of sidewalk safety and maintenance for our pedestrians of school age and beyond. But I would hate to think that I would like to see that bridge maintained as a linking automobile route. That's all. Thank you for the opportunity and providing this information for us.
Al or Anthony, can either of you comment on the elevation of the sidewalk under the bridge along Bronson Boulevard?
I can. What we are showing there really matches what is there now. I mean, that was all we were trying to do, is maintain the width Bronson has. It has enough width for 2 lanes and the bike lanes, but also the sidewalk on the outside does kind of rise. It's higher than the roadway at the bridge, but then tapers down to street level away from the bridge. And I guess there was a previous comment about the bridge kind of pushing into the embankment. It's actually the total length that we've shown there it's actually less than what the existing bridge is in terms of length. The existing bridge has 3 separate spans. I mean, you get the piers, that separate the lanes from the sidewalk. The design we're showing has a clear span, but we moved the abutments forward, but not this. I mean, as Anthony said earlier, there's actually about a 10-foot sidewalk under there, as opposed to right now it's basically about a 4-foot sidewalk behind the timber piers. So we're not pushing the walls farther into the embankment. We're actually bringing them a little bit forward, but because of the 3 spans that are there, we actually end up with more space. So hopefully that clarifies it. But it was, we were trying to maintain the sidewalks and the roadway underneath pretty much as they are now. So
Thanks, Al. Okay, Melinda, you should be able to unmute yourself to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate being able to come together. I do, as another member of the community who lives very close to the bridge and has small children, I echo both the concerns of reopening the traffic, as well as the joy that we've had in closing the traffic and the safety for our children. So I can talk about a lot of emotional aspects of this. I think it was interesting at the beginning of the presentation when it was mentioned that Inkster is part of the backbone of the community. And I think that being a backbone does not necessarily mean vehicular traffic. And I think if you look at a lot of data and communities actually closing vehicle traffic improves the communication and the flow within communities. And I think that that's been shown over the last year when the bridge has been closed. It really has opened the community in a way that has not only protected our children, but I think improved the communication and the flow of non-vehicular traffic. I also echo other people and concerns about, this is 2022. I think that we have to focus on alternative modes of transportation, given all of our acknowledgement of global warming. And I don't necessarily feel that opening it to vehicle traffic is the right answer. The data side of me, I appreciate data. I'm a researcher and I feel that that aspect has been missed in this presentation, as well as kind of moving up to this point. I echo the fact that other people have stated that the city has gone forward and is at this point of discussing the aesthetics of a bridge that carries cars and pedestrians without obtaining data. You know, I think about the people that are not on this conversation. You know, there have been many people tonight who have voiced concerns about that and have voiced their desire to maintain a pedestrian only bridge, but I worry about the people who were not on today and the fact that we do have surveys, but we don't have an inclusive survey that has talked to all of the community members. So that's number one. And number two, I'd be interested in their comments about how the lack of car vehicular transportation across the bridge has impacted the surrounding streets. I'd be interested in actually data looking at that. Like, what impact has this had? You know, really, what difference would it make for traffic patterns to make the bridge? I mean, the bridge is a pedestrian only bridge right now, and it has been for many months. What kind of impact has that had? Has there been any impact on emergency vehicles, other city vehicles, et cetera? And if not, then what is the downside of maintaining this as a pedestrian only bridge?
Thanks, Melinda. Okay, Michael Harrison, I am going to unmute you next. Hold on. Mike, you should be able to unmute.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for answering my questions. I'll keep it brief and simple. I just had two questions that I wanted to ask. I wanted to know, is there a neighborhood activator for our community that is in place for us to kind of have this discussion with and to kind of work through some of these issues with? And then the second question is, what steps, well, I think, let me change it. Will we have a chance to meet again with this body and this group if the residents in the community, you know, come up with something, or will we have a chance to revisit this subject again before 2024?
So I'll answer the first part of the question. Mike, I am currently hiring for a neighborhood activator right now. So in the short run, it is me and Nolan as the planning staff that can assist neighborhoods in having, whether it be traffic calming focused or neighborhood planning discussions to get those activities moving forward. And then I'll let Anthony or Al comment on your second question.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. You know, certainly having the amount of time that we do between now and 2024 allows for, you know, additional conversation. I think certainly once the feedback is received from tonight's meeting as far as aesthetic options that people like or don't like, and even the comments that we're hearing right now, you know, as far as railings and things like that, you know, allow us to take another look and see if there's anything that can be done differently or something that you know, possibly could have been missed during, you know, original consideration. And obviously to come back out and show what those opinions of the aesthetic options were.
Thanks, Anthony. Okay, Allison, you should be able to unmute yourself to speak.
Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so Russell and I are here, and we used to live where Justin lives, which is at the top of the bridge, just at that stop sign that nobody stops at on the west side of the bridge. And I actually had a newborn when we lived there, and so I was frequently pacing around that living room looking out those windows. And I can definitely attest to the danger of the traffic that goes down Inkster. And I'll come back to that in a minute, but I want to say that I now live on Wilshire. We live on Wilshire, which is the next street over to the south. And so I don't have data as Melinda so smartly suggested, but I do have my own, again, anecdotal experience of being on one of those streets that I believe has received a lot of the new traffic. And, you know, for sure, we have seen the traffic on our street increase, but there's a big difference. And I haven't been on this call since the very, very beginning, so maybe somebody else has pointed this out. But the reality of that situation, it is a very unique situation because coming towards the bridge, you're going downhill from both directions and you pick up a lot of speed. And, you know, not only did I observe this, but one day and I don't know if another neighbor shared the story, so I apologize, but a car came so fast off that bridge that they smashed into the retaining wall of the house at the top of the bridge, flipped their car upside down and 180 degrees and landed on the roof of the car. And, you know, neighbors rushed to help the person. And there's a whole other story to that weird situation. But it is a very, very dangerous situation because of the slope of the road. And I don't know if other people have said that, but I think that has to be considered. Yes, I get more of the traffic, but it is, first of all, there's not as many pedestrians because it's not a pedestrian throughway the way the bridge is. And it's just not as dangerous. You know, you step out into Wilshire and you know that there's going to be cars, but they're not driving as fast as they used to drive on Inkster before the bridge was closed. So I just think it's an important point of difference. So yes, I am affected, but I still want to see the bridge close because I know how dangerous it is when cars have access to that bridge. I would rather those cars drive down my street. So then the last thing I want to say, and this just goes back to the design comments that were made when we were recruited by my husband's employer to move to Kalamazoo. Both the realtor and the person that was driving us around drove us down Bronson Boulevard and under that bridge. And I still remember, you know, I'm a resident of New York City at the time, and I'm being flown out to this random Midwest town that I've never heard of before. It sounds a little funny. And they picked me up at the airport and I'm driving down Portage Road and I'm like, oh my goodness, you know, where am I right now? And then you drive down Bronson Boulevard and under that beautiful bridge, and it just charms you to death. And I have now been involved in the recruiting for the same organization multiple times, and we always make sure to drive people under that bridge. And the people that have come have commented on it and how beautiful they thought it was and how charming it was. And even if they don't live in the area, they still use that pathway to work because it's so beautiful. And you know, is that the most important thing in the universe when you're dealing with budgets? I don't know. I don't know how people feel about those things, but you know, Kalamazoo has a lot going for it when we're trying to recruit people to town, but like tons and tons of charming, beautiful moments might not be at the top of the list. And that is a beautiful, charming moment in our city. And I think it's really important to listen to the people who have spoken to design, and you have these people offering their assistance and their expertise and their talent. And I think listening to them and maintaining the charm and beauty of that space is really important. Not as important as protecting people's safety. And last thing I'll say, I love and respect all my neighbors, but I'm not in any way, shape, or form interested in keeping the riffraff off of my streets, you know, like that has like nothing at all to do with this. I don't know, that's just not a consideration for me. And I can speak for most of the people who I know and love on this call and say that that's nothing to do with it. So I hope you'll listen to us, and I hope you'll take our thoughts and our into account, and I hope we'll have another chance to meet with this body. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Okay, so we have two more hands raised, and these will be the last two of the evening. So the first one is Nada and Patricia. I'm going to unmute you or allow you to talk, so you should be able to unmute yourself. And then Dustin, you will be our last speaker.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. This is Nida. Thanks, everyone. I'll be really brief. I just have two quick questions. One, is the voting site already active?
It is not. It'll be up early next week.
Okay, great. Because I couldn't find it. The second one, it's a question about the sidewalks. I think I saw a single sidewalk. Is that correct?
That is correct. Go ahead.
Great. No, I just want to understand the reasoning for that. I understand that it's a wider, 8 feet wide sidewalk, but it does give preference to the cars as opposed to pedestrians. What's the reasoning of not having two sidewalks, which would have the beautiful views, from either side of the bridge? And that's it. Thank you.
Real quick, I'll try to answer your second part. Anthony, feel free to chime in. On the north side where the sidewalk is shown and where the plank sidewalk is now, there's sidewalk on both sides. So the sidewalk on the bridge is connecting the two halves. On the south side of the bridge, there is sidewalk on only one side and not on the other. And so, that is why the design reflects the sidewalk on one side versus the other in what was shown today. Okay, so Dustin, I'm about to put you forward. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for this great presentation. I'm really inspired by all the comments from the community here. My question touches on something that I think Anthony might have already touched on earlier about the structural integrity of the bridge. And my big question is, has the city considered a no build option? I'm hearing a lot about, what this bridge means to the community. And it seems to be, the bridge as it stands right now seems to mean more to the community than, being a backbone, so to speak. And I find it's really interesting because right now it's closed to motor vehicles, but it is open to pedestrians and bicyclists. So it's this modal filter kind of concept. Seems like a lot of people enjoy that. It kind of occurred in a politically neutral way. It's very natural how it just happened. It seems to be very favorable in the community. And I was actually down there earlier today. I started on the west side of the bridge and moved around in a counterclockwise fashion and got to the east side of the bridge in under 3 minutes. And that was by bike. So when we say it's, this critical connector, I'm just not sure that that's true. And it seems like from a cost benefit analysis, just doing nothing is essentially better than, searching after all this money that, like somebody said before, it could be used to pave a lot of neighborhood streets. So I think, let's think what this really means for the community. And yeah, I guess that was it. That was my comment. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Dustin. Okay, thank you everyone for attending and commenting this evening. I'll see if Anthony or Al, do you have any closing remarks that you would like to make? Any questions unanswered right now?
Really just to reiterate what's been said or what I had said previously. And then also, I do really appreciate the comments that were made tonight. The sentiment is felt, and I do, this is the same sentiment that we hear in a lot of different neighborhoods throughout the city. I think we have a lot of similar issues that we're seeing, and
Show me another one with 2 slopes.
Sorry.
And that could be taken negatively. It's such a widespread problem, but I do think it allows us to focus on those issues, specifically citywide. And it allows us to kind of implement these tools that we have and that we're learning about in different neighborhoods throughout the city to tackle these issues that everybody faces, and still being able to, you know, facilitate transportation or use for all users in a safe way. I think that this bridge certainly, I think that when we started this process off, we knew that this would need to be, you know, a bridge that the city was proud of, that residents enjoyed seeing, and I think that was reflected. I think we saw opportunity to improve on some of the aspects that were there that pay homage to our effort for pedestrian safety and slowing vehicles down, you know, by including street lighting above and below the bridge, widening non-motorized paths, narrowing driving lanes. You know, all of these things work in conjunction, and they don't work in conjunction in one location. It's a network. It is a holistic approach to solving these problems. And I guess too, I'd just like to say that whenever we talk about traffic calming and pedestrian safety, it's never just the physical element. You know, education, awareness, you know, the community making that a priority. It takes talking about these issues too, and we're doing that. And I think that point is getting across as well. So I take all of that as really good progress. And thank you for the comments tonight.
Thanks, Anthony. So again, the survey, the website, this recording will be up next week. Again, the website is www.imaginekalamazoo.com/projects/Inkster Bridge. You can reach out to us with questions to either Anthony or I. Our city emails are always our last name and our first initial at kalamazooCity.org. So please feel free to, if you have questions, you can reach out. Thanks again, and please visit the website next week. Have a good evening.